know that there are people who are really looking for in their Power BI environment. So I'm really going to try to address that community with making sure that everybody understands that that's what we're going to be looking at. But hey, Microsoft has integrated everything into Fabric. So we're going to be talking about that too, so that we get the entire experience. So a little bit about me. My name is Ginger Grant. I am a Microsoft Data Platform MVP and a Microsoft certified trainer. I've got 3 classes right now on LinkedIn, and I finished a 4th one today, which is why I'm in this so attractive hotel room. And I'm also a Microsoft certified trainer, and I talk quite a bit about all things Fabric and Power BI. I recently went to the Fabric conference in Vegas, which was a great event. Highly recommend that if you have not ever been. All right, so what are we going to be talking about? We're going to be talking about licensing considerations, because you can't do what you want when it comes to CI/CD. You can only do it based on your Power BI license. But hey, there is always something that you can do for free. So naturally, I want to cover the free stuff because not everybody can just go buy licenses on a whim, and I understand that. And I'm also going to be talking about Tyndall. If you are not familiar with Tyndall, you will be by the end of this, and that is how I'm pronouncing TMDL. It's commonly pronounced as Tyndall. We're going to be talking about GitHub and PBIP files, configuring workspaces, and of course, development pipelines. All right, so licensing. Let's talk about licensing when it comes to Power BI. If you want to use the service to have a repo where you check things in and check things out, you are going to need an F SKU of some kind. It does not have to be an F64. You can make do with an F2 SKU, but you do have to have at least an F2 SKU. So just having Power BI Pro or E5, it's not going to cut it inside of the service. And you also need a premium SKU if you want to create development pipelines. So Microsoft has retired premium SKU, so that is an F64 SKU. So that is what is required if you want to use development pipelines. If you're like, I don't know if I want to use a development pipeline, I will get into it so you can find out if that is something that you want to do. So we'll talk more about those. But here is where we get into the cool free stuff. You can use Git for free. When you're not online, you can completely manage your Power BI reports by using Git and checking things in and checking things out. So we're going to first off take a look at that. So let's talk about the DevOps issues with Power BI. It's not baked in. It's an add-on, and you can tell. So unfortunately, what does that mean? It means that if you're in desktop and you want to know if something's checked in and checked out, you can't tell. That is a completely separate experience, which means that different changes can be made to a file. And you are going to have to enforce some standards. If you want people to be using a solution inside of desktop, then you're going to have to make that happen. And that's, can have issues with adoption because everyone's got to know how to do it, use it, and be consistent about it. There are some pretty good ways of implementing this, and one of them is basically restricting who can publish to the Power BI service. If you do that, then you have a better control over, because if you're only pulling things out of a repo, then everyone's going to have to be putting their stuff in the repo. But those are things you're going to need to think about. Now, one of the things that Microsoft created is they created I hate the fact this is still in preview because it's been out there for well over a year. And what is in preview? The PBIP files. And this is what you need to save in order to use source control. It breaks up a PBIX file. By the way, if you've ever wanted to really look inside of a PBIX file, if you just change PBIX to zip, you can open it up in any zip publisher, such as, for example, like 7-zip or Extract. You can take a look at it there. But that is what PBIP does. It kind of busts it out into separate folders. And instead of getting a file, you're going to get a PBIP file and a set of folders and a file called get.getignore. and you're going to get filename.dataset and filename.report. Those are going to be the names of your folders that you have created. And we'll take a look at those here in a minute. So there are some issues, like I said, with this message, because it's kind of hard to tell what got changed. Some things are just hard to see. If it's really, really complicated, you might have issues with it. Most of it's pretty standard. It doesn't support image changes really well, but what I mean is it's very difficult to tell what's going on. And so tracing things is kind of hard. And it's only tangentially related to migration. So if somebody does this, you're going to have to make sure that changes are implemented in prod. So we'll take a look at that. So how do you make this work? Well, how do you configure it? Well, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be storing your Power BI project in a Git repo. You're just going to need to create it, make sure that you've got VS Code configured so you can see the changes in there. And to do that, you need to make sure that you've got the appropriate Git libraries added to VS Code to make all of that happen. And that's pretty easy to do. There's a couple of Microsoft learns as to like which libraries that they are, but definitely it's the Git library. So, you're really going to have to implement some person procedures to make this work, because you're going to have to make people check things in and check things out, and only, you get the latest that way. And you can monitor the changes inside of VS Code when they occur. So one of the things that I mentioned before about Timdal is important because this is the format that Power BI saves its PBIP files. And Timdal was originally created by the developers that created tabular model format, so Daniel and friends. And what it is a way to look at the contents of your PBIP file in a way that kind of makes sense. I mean, you can kind of read it, but not, and it's a bunch of JSON. So it translates everything to JSON. And you have the option of Timdal or not Timdal. Timdal is easier to read, so highly recommend Timdal. Microsoft is really encouraging everyone to use Timdal as a format and to look at the contents of Power BI that way, because in this latest release, they added a Timdal view to everything inside of Power BI. So if you haven't messed around with the preview features, you missed that. So we're going to take a look at how to do that as well. But knowing and understanding Timdal is really the only way you're going to see changes inside of Power BI. So the Timdal view that I mentioned is just got added. So you're going to need to, well, you really should, because this is really cool, put it inside of, open up the preview features and then add it. You are going to have to restart after you do that, but it's a great view and you can see what's going on that way. And yeah, you're going to need to restart. So let's take a look at that, and I'm going to do a demo with that as well. So here I've got a simple Power BI report file here, and notice that I've got my Timdal icon right here. So you can see that it just added, I did it badly, but this is added right underneath my DAX control. I mean, it looks like a slash, so I don't want it, so I'll do this right. So see, I can zoom in appropriately for that. So definitely want to do that. Now, how did I get that to show up there? Well, if I went to go to File, and then of course, Options and Settings, it's under Options. Come on. Seriously? All right. So it is in the preview features. And you can see that there's a couple of things you're going to want to turn on. So for one, you're going to need to make sure that you turn on this Power BI project PBIP file option. So make sure that is turned on. And you want to store your semantic model using Timdal. And I also have selected store reports using the enhanced metadata format. That is going to help me look at that better. So these three options need to be on for CI/CD and Power BI. All right, so what did I get for that? Well, I'm going to actually, so let's take a look at my file explorer here because I just want to take a look at that. And all right, so I've just got my sales analysis PBIX inside of my CI/CD Power BI demo here. So just a simple PBIX is what this is. So we're going to watch this change. I am going to do a file and I'm going to do a save as and scroll down and browse. Go to where I am now. And here, instead of a PBIX, I'm going to change this to a PBIP file. So I'm going to go ahead and do that and then say save. Now, what do I get when I do that? It's working. Okay. So as we can see here in my File Explorer, I had just this PBIX file, which you can see I haven't saved in a long time. And now I have a PBIP file. And inside of this PBIP file, I've got a semantic model. And I also have, and I've got a report. So I've got different items because I've got different things that I could possibly do with that. So let's take a look at what these things that I just created are. And then I've got my get ignore, which just gives me some information. And I'm going to go ahead and open up VS Code. And we're going to add this PBIP file to a Git repo. So I'm doing this and opening it up. And I want to do a file and I want to open a whole folder. So what I'm going to do is I want this whole folder. So I want to select this folder because this has got everything in it. So let's take a look at what we've got. And yes, I trust the authors because it was me. Okay, so inside of my report, I've got local JSON file settings. In here inside of my definition, I can see that I've got my report definition, and we can see what that has got in it, as well as any version information. Not that exciting. In my semantic model, I've got all of my tables. So we can see all of my tables. And this is where this gets into TIMDL. So this is TIMDL for all of my models. PIBR is for the JSON for the report element. So this is for visual. And you can see, if we look through here, we can see like my layout optimization, how I've got panes, any resource packages, and then different settings that I happen to have set up here. And then all of my information for my tables, my database that I'm connecting to, expressions, and you can see, where it came from. I can take a look at my model, where the model came from. And these are my relationships, from my different products there. And then get ignore just basically tells you what that is. So this I'm like, great, this is everything that I want. So what I want to do with this is I want to go ahead and make sure that I go ahead and save this. So what I want to do is I want to click on this source control button here, since I have added this, and I want to go ahead and I want to initialize a repository. So I want to click on this here blue button. And this is going to add my CI/CD PBI demo to source. And I'm like, yep, this is going to be my new. So I just wanted to give it a message just for starters. And I'm going to say that I want it to commit. And I'm going to stage it first because I always forget to do that first. And I'm just going to say always. And then once it is staged, then it can go ahead and then commit it. So then I want to go ahead and publish my branch. And so it's going to publish to, I want it to go to a private repo, and I want it to go ahead and publish. So it is busy doing that now. So let's take a look at what it's really doing. So if we look at, and it's telling me that it successfully did that. So I want to open it on GitHub. So if we look at this, we see that I've got my CI/CD PBI demo, and I've got my sales analysis report, all that stuff in here, semantic model, and I've got all the definitions and diagrams. All that stuff is inside of Git. Now, if we look at this, so I've got my new repo, and this one should be my CI/CD PBI demo, which is what it's just opened up over here. So obviously I did have to have a Git repo created to be able to do this, which I have. So I have created a new repo, and I have all of my report inside of source control. Okay, well, let's do some things and make some changes to this. Well, first thing I want to do, just for, why not, is I want to create a new measure. And I'm going to create because I want to see this new measure basically inside of source control. So I'm going to call this new measure total sales. I'm going to blow this up a little bit to make it easier to see. I think I am anyway. All right, so I'm going to create a measure called total sales. It's going to be pretty basic. I want the sales. Oh, of course, I have to remember what I'm doing. I want to sum my sales item here. I'm going to create that new measure. And it's going to be inside of sales here. So, all right, I'm going to zoom back out so we can see my new measure. Yep, now I have total sales. So, okay, that's one thing that I did, but I want this to be really obvious that I made changes because I want to be able to see what I got going on here. So what I'm going to do is I am going to modify this a little bit, and I want to throw up a card because I want to show something just, really different, right? So I'm just going to add my new measure into my card on my sales summary page. And then I want to go ahead and save this. Now notice here, it's saving this as a Power BI project. So once again, if we go look at my repo here, you should see that I just changed it. Yep, 321, I just changed it. So these files are changed. What is that going to do for me inside of VS Code? I didn't publish. So if we look at this, we can see that I've got some, it notices that I've got some changes here. And this is where it gets kind of complicated because it's not easy to see what the heck this is. So you can see here that I've got, I changed the position. And then it's got this as being, new. And I've got a different diagram change here. And then if we look at my Timdo file, this is where my new measure is. So I've got changes in the report folders and in my Timdo folders because I've got my new total sales measure. And you can clearly see this. This is much easier to read that, hey, look, that was added. The other stuff's, yeah, not so terribly obvious. So I'm going to document this. We're going to say add a new measure. And then I want to go ahead and commit these changes. So, and I know I'm committing to main, and I should be doing into a dev branch, but I've got a couple of demos that I want to do. So I'm going to go ahead and sync those. So it's going to push and pull, and I'm going to say, okay. So this is going to commit the changes that I just made to source control. So now we have a record, the fact that I have gone in and done something and made a change and the changes that I've done. So if we go back to, source control, we can see that, we can see the different changes in here as well. So I can look at my history, and we can see that I added a new measure and that it was new. And we can see that I did it. So this is a kind of, history that's important to have inside of Power BI. And you can do this regardless of what kind of license you have. Works for all the licenses, and you can implement this. The tricky thing is that you can't tell by looking at this Power BI file that there's any source control in it at all. So that's kind of suboptimal. But I want to go ahead now and publish my report. And you see I'm logged in. And the reason that I want to publish my report is because I want to take a look at this in the Power BI service next. So I want to make sure that I do that. I'm going to publish to class workspace. And I'm going to go ahead and select that. And it's going to publish my report to that. That's publishing the PBIP file. All right, we'll look at that later, but now we know it's all published and we're ready to go with that. Now you're like, okay, that's cool, but I can't tell what anything has really happened. Now we're going to be talking about DevOps inside of Power BI. So of course you need to have DevOps, and it needs to be in the same place that you have your Power BI or your Fabric tenant, and you need a Git repo. Now, here's the thing. I don't care if you've got an E5 and everybody's got Pro inside of your organization. If you want to use DevOps with either Git or Azure DevOps inside of the service, then yeah, you're going to have some kind of an FSKU or trial account. I will say that my trial account is kind of like a toddler. It's going to be turning 2 in 2 months. So I am a big fan of trial accounts. I do also have a Power BI F capacity, but I'm cheap and I leave it off all the time and I just use the trial. Love the trial. Now, the one thing that I don't like about DevOps inside of the service doesn't support everything. So dashboards, machine learning experiments, data flows Gen 1 and Gen 2, yeah, they're not supported, which is very unfortunate. But my Power BI reports are, and every other Fabric component like databases and lake houses and warehouses, they all are supported. Although I'm not going to get into that, but I will say that they support the transfer of the structure, not the data. So that's kind of tricky when it comes to databases or data sources. All right, so what are the difference between the two methods? Well, if you do it in the Fabric service, you know somebody's modified something. It says uncommitted. We'll take a look at one of my test workspaces, and you can see I got a lot of uncommitteds. You can't see what the changes were made. You can't see that in there. But you don't need any other tools, and you don't have any changes in your saving process. And with desktop, you don't really know what's going on. But you can compare, but you do need tools to do that because you're going to need to install VS Code if you want to see what's going on. And you do have to save the file differently because you got to use that PBIP to do it. So what can you do with Git integration? So I don't know about you, but before this existed, I did the old school method of putting things inside of SharePoint. And I had somebody overwrite my stuff, but I had to fix it, and it was a pain. I don't like any of that. So that is something, of course, you're not going to have to worry about. You can roll back to previous versions. You can branch the code. As a matter of fact, when you are looking at doing it inside of the Fabric service, you really are going to need to look at how to do branching better. Can't do what I was just showing you, the cheater way. You're really going to want to create a single person branch for your user branch, and then have a dev branch, and then have a main branch. So don't do what I'm going to show you and put everything into dev. I will say that Catherine Williamson has a really good blog post on the organization required inside of your tenant to be able to make this work. And basically, you do need that user workspace so that you can check things out to there. So you don't like trounce all over everybody else's stuff. You also, this is workspace specific. So you have to add Git integration to a workspace. And if you want to have detailed comments, you do one at a time. Otherwise, you get them as a block. So you do get, if you want to, you can do this automated too, because the REST APIs allow you to do that. And this is going to help you make sure your work doesn't get overridden. So what you cannot do with it, you can't see the changes at the fine grain level. You can if you choose to open it up, but not just natively. It doesn't work that way. You can modify different parameters. By the way, if you have not looked at parameters inside of Fabric, that's something that got announced at FabCon that's really, really cool. And again, this is just for the files. If you want to move one workspace to somewhere else, this isn't going to get you there. So let's take a look at DevOps in the workspace. So I'm going to go to Power BI. Actually, Power BI. I'm going to go to my Fabric tenant here. And go ahead and log into that real quick. I just knocked myself out of it. All right, so here I am. And as you can guess, I got a number of different workspaces. This is the one where I just put a report into with the ever popular Clippy. And yes, I did this as a PBIP, but I still got my report and my semantic model. That didn't change. So let's take a look. Actually, I want to show you one where I've got it set up. And this is, I call this the cooking school demo, because I'm going to show you the cake that's already done. And then I'm going to show you how to make it. So this particular workspace, my Fabric workspace, has got a whole bunch of stuff in it. And notice here, I have a column called Get Status. And when this wakes up, we'll see what the different Get Status I are. Now, like I said, you have to do this in every single workspace. And we can see here that I did sync this report. And yeah, I've got a lot of stuff that's not committed, which means I haven't checked it in. So I've got uncommitted pipelines. And I've got, data, some notebooks. Yeah, I haven't committed them because I'm lazy that way. But I wanted to show you this. And I haven't committed these because I'm probably going to get rid of them because they have dumb names. But if we look at these, we see that this is unsupported. So this is how you know that, yeah, it'd be really nice to be able to do a Dataflow Gen 2 and have that in source control. But I can't. It is not supported. A couple of other things that are not supported are this is a machine learning module. Yeah, not supported either. This is a model. This is a machine learning experiment. I created that on purpose just so that I could see if it was turned off or not. And do I have any dashboards in here? I guess I don't. That was lazy of me. So we can see that I have 63 things that are not committed. And what I can do in here to make this a little bit better, these are all synced. If I want to, add some of the myriad of stuff that I don't have in there, like I could add a my green taxi. I'm going to add World War I because I'm going to go ahead and commit this. And I'm going to add then the changes. Now, every time somebody opens this up and does something to it, it is then committed. So everything is committed whether you want to or not. You have a pretty big, so if you open it and save it, yeah, you have checked it out. So let's take a look at how to do that. So I'm going to show you workspace settings, and then we're actually going to go ahead and do the steps that are required. And geez, very, very slow today. So in my workspace, I have to have a Fabric license of some kind. Notice it says current license is a trial. If you do not have this, you cannot do any kind of Git integration. So we can see here, I have DevOps, I have an organization, I have a project, and then of course I have branches because I did this one right. So I've got a dev branch, I got dev, I got main, and I can go ahead and switch my branches up. So this is what I'm going to create. So I've got this in my Fabric workspace. Let's take a look at another workspace, the one that we just looked at, the one with Clippy, the class workspace. And this only has my brand new folder, brand new semantic model, and report that I just added to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here to workspace settings. and make sure that I have set this up. Yep, this has got trial going, so I'm good with that. Then I'm going to go to Git integration. Now, here are my options. I can choose to use DevOps or GitHub, either one of those. And I am going to choose to select my DevOps. And it is now what I find funny is that I don't know if you know this or not, but Microsoft decided to rename Azure Active Directory, and now they call it Entra. And I always find it interesting places where they didn't remember to change the name, and this is one of them. So yeah, it's calling this my Azure Active Directory account, which is fine. I think Entra is a dumb name. So I'm going to go ahead and select that because that is exactly what I want. So my organization here is Desert Isle Group. So I'm going to select that. Now, if we look at this, they're like, what project? Well, I didn't create one. So let's go into DevOps and actually create this. So I'm going to go into Azure DevOps. This will get me in there. Shouldn't have to sign in again, but you know. Oh, what do you mean I can't? I swear. Yes, I do. I don't want to go to Twitter either. I swear they shouldn't make logging in so darn hard. So in a minute, I'll get into DevOps and then I will then take a look at my creating up a project so that I can configure that inside of my workspace. Come on.
Could it be in your another browser, Ginger? Or could it be in different type of browser you were using earlier, or no?
No, it has to do with the fact that I just logged. I think
Okay.
it's logging in as a different one. So sign
Yeah,
out.
just giving
Yeah,
hints
because
in case.
I think it's under a different account. Let me see if that'll make it happy. Should have logged into this one. It's always annoys me. All right, let's see if it'll let me in this one. There we go. Some games I'm playing with this. I should really just. Ah, why does it not like me today? Hold on. See if I can't log into it over here. This shouldn't be it should be, here we go. All right, so what I want to do is I want to, inside of here, DevOps, I want to, organization settings here. what I want to do is I want to create a new project and then, of course, add it to it. So I'm going to call this PBI. I'm not sure this is going to work. I think this is logging me into the wrong place, but we'll see. I'm going to go ahead and make this private, and I'm going to go ahead and create it. So now I have my new one. So I'm going to make sure that I have a repo. I don't care about this. So I need to make sure that I have a repo that exists. And I'm going to go ahead and initialize this. And it looks fine to me. So I'm going to go ahead and say set up and build. So these are the steps that you need to do prior to be able to connect to it, because if you have no place to connect, then you can't get into it. So I'm going to go now that I've got everything set up, I should be able to then just log in to it. So back to Fabric we go with this. And now that I have a project, send it me somewhere else. I'm just going to go ahead and put it in test right now because I don't know why I'm in a different place. And it's going to go to Git repo. And, oh, come on. And I have a test branch. And I don't have no branches. See if I'm just going to pick a different one just because it's not working for whatever reason. And I'm gonna by default be main. And I'm gonna go ahead and create a Git folder, and I'm gonna call this class workspace, because that is the name of this particular workspace. So I'm gonna go ahead and say connect and sync. It says it doesn't exist. I know that. So go ahead and create and sync. I'm gonna go ahead and do that. And now I'm connected and it is syncing. So now my report sync. Now, if I just open this up, and I just, go in here, I'm going to resize this here in a minute. Let's me. Okay. I'm just going to play around and do something just to know, make a difference. I'm going to go ahead and save this. So I saved my report and I changed my report. Okay, so let's go back to my class workspace. And when it's not playing, I refresh this, we should see the change that I made to it. It should say uncommitted. There we go. So I have an uncommitted change here. And I have the icon that shows me that as well. So that you can tell, hey, look, somebody has changed this. And if we look at source control, we can see that, hey, this is not changed. So I can select everything in here. That's just one thing. And I can put in a message. This is optional, which is too bad. It should be mandatory, but I can just say, modified visual. And then I can go ahead and commit this. So as you can see, this is a much better way of doing it than doing it on the desktop, because you can see immediately that something is checked out. But one thing this won't do for you is this is not going to move this to another workspace. So if we're trying to do dev, test, and prod, yeah, this isn't going to get us there. But it does get us into source control, which is a fine thing. Now, I know for those of you who've done quite a bit with DevOps, you're like, well, can't I just move it in DevOps? No, you can't. There's no way to move things inside of DevOps. Unfortunately, that doesn't work. So we're kind of stuck with a hybrid version. And this hybrid version is basically doing this plus dev pipelines. So let's talk a little bit about dev pipelines. All right, so development pipelines are, like I said, they're completely separate from DevOps or Git repo, but they are very, very important because that's how you're going to be moving things to different workspaces. So I hope in your environments you at least have dev, test, and prod. Always that is preferable. You may have more, but you should have at least that. And you want to move things there when they're ready to go. Now, you don't have to move anything that's not ready. But one very important thing to remember, you can't roll back. So if you migrate something from dev to test, and your tester's like, yeah, that's crap, get rid of it. You have to do that manually. There's no, I'm just going to click a button and go back. You can click a button and go forward, but you can't click a button and go back. And it doesn't include everything. It includes what you say, which is nice. Do like that part of it. Now, what development pipelines does? What do they do? Well, they migrate content from one workspace to another. And what's really, really cool is that you can set up rules for changing connections. Because obviously, if you're going to be connecting to dev and then test, you're going to have different sources for your data, and you can automatically create alerts and rules to make that happen. It does keep the data. If you have imported it, you have that imported data. And it maintains incremental refresh if you have that set up as well. So what it doesn't do any kind of role assignments if you have that in there. It's not going to do a refresh schedule. You're going to have to create a new refresh schedule. It's not going to add credentials. You need to do that as well. And if you have endorsed a workspace, that doesn't get changed when you move it. It stays where it is. So you're going to have to do separate. So things to remember about pipelines. One thing that is kind of interesting about pipelines is using dev pipelines is one of those things that inside of a workspace, because again, all workspace driven, that you can say, oh, I wish to have my contributor do this. That's optional. Do you want the contributors to be able to use dev pipelines? If so, you can let contributors do that. Otherwise, the people who can create and move things into a pipelines are people who are member or admin. If they don't have member or admin, then they're not going to be doing that. You can't include a workspace in more than one pipeline. So little story here. I was at a client and they're like, we want you to set up a dev pipeline for us. And I'm like, okay. And I tried, I'm like, well, I can't because I cannot select the workspace. It won't let me. It's not on the list. And I went and looked that up. Well, the reason why it wasn't in the list, I couldn't see it, was because somebody else had started creating a dev pipeline. They had added the workspace that I wanted to add, and I didn't have access to that dev pipeline, which meant that I didn't even know it existed. All I knew is that I cannot add this particular workspace because it's not in the list. So if you ever run into that and you're like, how come it's not there? That means it's included in another dev pipeline, and you can't do that. A workspace can only be included in one, which makes sense. You don't want like two different things moving it. But yeah, if you see that and like, why is it in the list? That would be why. And you want to take a look at implementing parameter changes. By the way, this is something really cool that changed at FabCon. And you will want to take a look at the new ways of doing it. But the Power BI ways are still the same. All right, let's take a look at development pipelines inside of Fabric. So I'm going to show you how to create one here. Now, oh, by the way, you do have to have an F64. So if you can do it, then you will click on the magic ellipse menu. I call it that with the 3 dots. You may not have 3 dots because you may have much bigger screen resolution than I do. But I've got 3 dots. And in my 3 dots, I see my little rocket ship. And rocket ships are for development pipelines. So in my little rocket ship, I'm going to create a new pipeline. And I'm going to call this, I don't know, PBI pipeline. And then I'm going to go ahead and say next. Now, here's the thing. When this first came out, I was working for a client who was all mad because they did not have dev, test, and prod. Oh no, they had model office. And then they had something else. They ended up with 4. So you can call this whatever you want. And if you want to add another one, and you want to call this, model office, and you want to call this prod, yeah, go for it. And you can keep on doing this. If you've got like 5 different stages, have a party. So I could create this, or I could basically say that one's that's stupid. I don't want model office because it's dumb. And I want to learn how to spell production. So put that back. So like I said, you're not stuck with the names, and you're not stuck with how many there are. So feel free to mix that up and put in as many as your organization uses. And really happy that when they changed that. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and say create. Now, the things that if you notice, they give you this little thing because a lot of people are like me, how come I can't see my workspace? Yeah, because somebody else put it in one already. And so I'm going to use my class workspace that we just looked at. And I'm going to go ahead and I want to assign my workspace. So this is going to be in my dev and my PBI pipeline. Now, next thing I want to do is I want to deploy this. And I don't have a test workspace. So stage. So again, I can go back in here and rename. So I'm going to go ahead and create a workspace real quick to make that my test workspace. So I'm going to call this my new workspace, class workspace test. And notice it's empty. I'm going to create a new one. And this is going to be, yep, you guessed it, class workspace prod. Go ahead. Now I've got 3 different workspaces, all of them empty. So I'm going to go back into my Power BI pipeline here. And now I can then add my other workspaces. So I'm going to add test, and I'm going to say assign a workspace. Now, one thing that's kind of interesting about this is that you'll see here that you've got this new deployment pipelines. Okay, so yes, I have been doing this for a little while, but I hate this. And this is why, because I think this is like really hard to see. You may like this. It's just maybe me that sees this, but I don't particularly like this view of it. You may decide that that you like it, but I don't. So you can look at it like this, and then you'll see it this way. So to each their own. I like it like this. So we can see the different elements that are listed here. And we can see here, of course, dashboards are available, which is great. And if we take a look at this little drop down, we can do a compare. This is what I like about it. And notice here it says, hey, look, these are different. So I'm going to go ahead and deploy, and says you are going to deploy to the next stage. And do you want to continue if something fails? Sure. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And it's going to copy the content to the workspace. And it's going to go ahead and do that. Now there's a little lightning bolt here. I can't remember how smart I was going to create. And this little lightning bolt is how you create different rules. And I can create a rule here that basically changes parameters. And I need to have, so I can change it for when they change. So here, yes, I can change the database name. And I can say that I want to change this to other. And then I want to add another rule and change the server And I'm going to change that to other as well. Obviously, they need to kind of exist in a pipeline for these to be working. But this means that when it moves to test, I'm not going to have, I'm going to have a different server name and a different database name every time it moves. So that is what it's going to be when I do that. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And so this is my rule that I created here. So when I do that, it'll automatically then change it. All right, so if I want to do my compare, I can see that it's different because I added a rule. I'm going to go ahead and deploy it. And now I'm going to see this inside of test. So it said that my connection information is failed. So I'm going to have to get rid of this rule because I need a better rule. And my data sources that I have here are not very good. So I'm going to get rid of these. I really do need to set up a something in my workspace so that I can pick something that's real. But that is how you would do it if you had real data. So I'm going to tell it to deploy now. And it's not going to try to find servers and databases that don't exist. I won't have a problem. Oh, that's lovely. What is doing now? I don't have any rules anymore.
Ginger, can you ask a question here?
Sure.
Well, is it means this is the only way you can move to upper environment? For example, when we use GitHub, there is a GitHub actions where you have the CI/CD process. You moved from dev to your because mostly I work with the data engineering stuff like notebook and things like that. But it seems like for PBI, you don't have those options. It's only through the data pipeline. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Which a lot of people don't like at all. So if you don't like it, you're not alone. But yeah, the only way to move it is using the workspaces. So I did move them over here the first time when it was successful at it. So I was able to move my stuff from dev to test. And that's the only way you can do this is through the pipelines, and you cannot go back. And here's another thing that's super annoying too, especially if you're really into CI/CD. There's no controls over this, right? So if I feel like setting this up right now, there's no visibility inside of Git or DevOps that I just did this. So it moves your releases out of it, which I get is suboptimal.
Got it. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Even when data engineering workloads are integrated, this will not be transferred over to Git.
You can, but it doesn't. But as terms of you can set that up so that you can do that, but there's no way to really migrate from one workspace to another workspace in Git. I mean, you can do that even if you move this. Yes, it doesn't work like you would want it to, or like everything else does, basically. And I get that you're like, really? And the answer is yeah. Even though that there are a lot of people who are less than thrilled, shall we say, that it works this way. So
sorry, just one minute thing. If you're working on notebooks, for example, in Fabric, in a dev workspace, we would still use this deployment pipeline to push it to our environment.
Yes.
Okay.
So so generally speaking, when you're doing it, when you're using source control inside of the source, you would have a user workspace, and then you'd migrate it to dev, and then someone would be moving that from dev to test to prod separately. So yes, that is how you would do it. If you don't, there are people who I don't like that at all. You can modify the APIs to push it from Git. There are people who have done that. It's not so easy because basically you're doing kind of like a double deploy. It's possible to do it. It is not easy to do it. You're going to need to write the code for that. So yeah, it's not, I get this is like you're thinking this is, if you're not thrilled about it, you're not alone. But this does work. So this, one of the things that I will say, and Power BI gets, and Fabric, they get knocked a lot for their CI/CD solutions. And now you know why. Because if I've heard once, I've heard it 100 times, Databricks does this a lot better. And the answer is yes, it does. Long and the short of it, because this is the way it works. And if you're thinking, really? Yes, it really does. So, yeah.
I have a follow-up question, Ginger. So,
Sure.
I get to know about this long back. I don't know what is the update now. So, they're saying like Fabric can be, all the notebook, everything can be even developed from Visual Studio Code, right? And you can
Yes.
manage everything, right? Do you know any update there? Anything progressing?
So yeah, I mean, actually, I have it set up so that you can use it in VS Code. So you could open everything up in VS Code. It's not going to, when you do that, you connect to a workspace.
Mhm.
So yes, you can totally develop everything inside of VS Code. It's not going to change the DevOps experience in any way.
I see.
But yeah, I've got it set up to do that, as a matter of fact. I have a presentation that I did with Warwick Rudd on notebooks where I talk about how to set up VS Code for that, because it's kind of a lot of steps. I will say, since you asked, one of the things that you need to do is make sure I push this running. Is you need to install this Fabric data engineering element. And you also need to modify your path, are two of the steps that you need to do to be able to do this, in addition to adding notebooks to VS Code. But yeah, you can do this, and when you do, then you can select your workspace, which I have to sign in to do, and then I can then access all of my workspaces inside of VS Code.
Okay.
So, but yeah, you can definitely do it. It doesn't change anything from a CI/CD perspective, though.
Got it. No, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now it's fetching my data. And so here, as you can see, these are all of my workspaces. So I can open this up inside of here, but I'm not going to see a Power BI report here. But yeah, you can see my class workspace environment, but I don't see notebooks. So it's not that helpful for this particular one. But if I went back and selected something smarter, then I would be able to see a different workspace where I'd a notebook content that I could run here. You do copy it locally, by the way, when that happens. All right. So with that, great question. Glad you asked it. So when you're looking at CI/CD inside of Fabric, your licenses matter because it dictates what you can and can't do. But you can do that Power BI source control no matter what. You can always do a Git with that. Workspace is where DevOps is, and DevOps is specific to a workspace. And development pipelines don't really work as most people would like them to, because there's no tight integration with that and with DevOps or Git repos, unfortunately. And with that, does anybody have any questions? I put my contact information as the QR code, so if that works for you, I'd be happy to connect with anybody on the call. I also, if you do get, your work does do LinkedIn Learning classes for free, great way to learn some more about Fabric. And I do go into the steps that we talked about here to integrate DevOps inside of Fabric. Any questions that you haven't asked already?
Anyone, if you have any question, you can raise your hand and ask question. Maybe unmute yourself.
Yeah, you can put it in chat too. I'm happy to answer either way.
Sankalp, you can go ahead. You can
Uh,
unmute
so,
yourself. Yeah.
yeah, so essentially, right now it's mainly the source control of Power BI development right now in the preview, right? Is do you have you tried Azure pipelines integration so that we can replicate the content lifecycle management that they have on the Microsoft documentation where we kind of when we publish our report from Power BI desktop to the workspace, it gets reflected into other workspace which would be available to the clients.
You can, but this has everything to do with your license. Because if you
Th-
do
th-
not have an F2 SKU, then you cannot add DevOps to a workspace. So
Okay, so
is it
it's with
possible to do it that way? Yes, but this is all about licensing.
it's with licenses, okay.
Yeah. That's really the only reason that I showed you the thing about on desktop, because a lot of people are like, yeah, I don't have a Fabric license, so what do I do? And there is that option for you. So great question. Any other questions?
Feel free to drop the questions on the chat as well.
Well, again, thank you very much for inviting me. I hope to get up to Toronto and live in person at some point in time. Unfortunately, not this year, but I'm hoping for next year.
Amazing. That'd be great, Ginger. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your knowledge with us. We really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for joining. I'll stop the recording now. And